All right, everybody, we got a lot of good items on the docket today. For our news section, we got Anthropic proposes a new way to connect data to AI chatbots. Then OpenAI Sora Turbo model was leaked this week, and Zoom rebrands as an AI company. And finally, our deep dive. We're going to look at creating an entire marketing plan for a new startup company in ChatGPT in just a few minutes. Dave, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, Peter. How are you?
Not too bad. I can't complain. It's been a very busy week. Lots happening this week, and let's get a start with our first news item this week. So, what do you think about this news that Anthropic is proposing a new way to connect data to AI chatbots? Seems to be an intriguing move, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. I think we're still grappling to figure out what the right format for interacting with LLMs and AI is. And this tool by Anthropic, I think they're calling it, uh, you know, uh, using open technologies in an open source way, calling out that it's going to drive commitment to creating technology that drives meaningful change and serves as a public good for all. So they're really kind of framing this as we're the do-gooders here. We're kind of connecting this in. This idea is the Model Context Protocol, or MCP as they're calling it, is a different way to connect in with chatbots and give you. They've in the past kind of identified you can work with a desktop. They're connecting in Git, all these different protocols, so that you could have a chatbot that publishes your code potentially, or if there's a problem with it, it comes back and tells you where there's a problem with the code you just committed. Lots of different ways you can kind of bounce that back and forth. It's interesting, and I'm curious to see how this is going to land and how it's going to evolve over time. How about you, Peter? What do you think?
For sure. I mean, there's a point here that I think the world is heading towards, which is, in my mind, will it make sense some way down the road that everybody's running their own LLMs and then having locally, so to speak, in their enterprise, and then having their data sources connected to that, and every time there's an advance in LLM technology, you would essentially update that model inside of your IT environment, inside of your walled garden, your firewall, whatever it is? Or does it make more sense? And this seems to be where my mind is heading over recent months, which is, and I know that's where we differ a little bit, Dave, and I'm not saying you're wrong, that we need small specialized models that take care of individual specializations. I think there's a valid point there as well. But there's another view to think about, which is it could be possible that in the near to distant future, the LLMs become more of the user interface of the systems behind it. The language, like large language model, is essentially about exchanging information via language, right? And so, and in this case, human understandable language, and not some technical protocols. And so what about this approach where you have these frontier models that continue to get better um, at debating, at exchanging information, at understanding humans, at understanding and sharing empathy and reacting in the right way to the right situation, even if the cues are subtle in the language or in the interaction between humans
Mm-hmm.
and the systems. And then you have a backend that connects to that front end interface, that language interface, and helps and basically provides your internal intelligence, your internal data, your internal
Mm-hmm.
analysis, whatever it may be, and sort of, and therefore, through those frontier models, those large models has the best interface, but also with the private data. And I think this is where this is heading, or am I getting something wrong here, Dave?
No, that makes a lot of sense. Like I think I'm a huge fan of simplicity wherever you can implement simplicity, and if you can outsource some of this complex interaction to an LLM that is open and available, that makes a ton of sense. But where you've got complex organizational hierarchy, where you've got a C-level suite that needs some information, a next level of managers that need a different level of information, and those can't cross over. And where you've got internal financial data or customer data that you just can't let go of, if you're a health authority, something like that, then that doesn't make sense to push all that data into the cloud
Correct.
somewhere,
Correct.
or tap into something on that. But if it's translating between two different languages, one of you speaks Spanish, one of you speaks English, and you're trying to interact with that, I do think that sense where you might have a local small language model to deal with your internal data,
Right.
but you outsource that through an API, which is what they've essentially set up here, is that you outsource that problem. You don't build an AI to translate language.
Right.
That's going to continue to get better and iterate in this Anthropic model, and farming that part of the conversation out to an external source makes a ton of sense, as you say, as it continues to improve and develop and mature. That's where you should be leaning that out into. But where you've got that internal private complexity data, personal information, that's where you should kind of keep that in-house in some way that you can control.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me as well. So so there will be, of course, there will be room and need for both worlds. I believe. The
Mhm.
other item that I had in mind when this news came up was: is this strictly sort of a technical or a user need, meaning that a better way to connect flexibly and openly, or in a distributed way at least? I'm sure there's security measures implemented like authentication, etc. But is this maybe not just a technical requirement by the market or by the companies that build these tools? Is it maybe also a power move? By which I mean, it's clearly there's a bit of a trend here of at least a public understanding that OpenAI is kind of running away with the business at the moment, both in terms of their market capture as with regards to users, but also in terms of funding and sheer horsepower and momentum behind them. And so, is this maybe a power move by Anthropic to say, look, if we create this open protocol, it doesn't exactly scorch the earth, but it opens up to connect with other players like Google, like Amazon maybe, and a couple of other bigger players to join us on this open protocol, and therefore open up the world a little bit in terms of us together can connected through these protocols, and having an open app platform essentially will allow us to catch up or even surpass OpenAI's market dominance in this space. What do you think?
Yeah, is it? I think it's a interesting idea that I think OpenAI for most consumers, it's the for facial tissue, it's the Kleenex of the brand. You associate Kleenex with facial tissue. You don't think of facial tissue, and Kleenex is one of those brands
Right.
for a lot of the North American market. OpenAI has captured a lot of that, and Anthropic here might be that what they're doing is positioning this towards developers, which is an interesting kind of probe of the market to see where they can capture some market share,
Right.
where it's open, collaborative, open source is going to iterate over time. They're clearly targeting a different audience from OpenAI with this particular offering, probably just to see and explore what they can capture from the market in this space. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I think we'll keep digging into this a little bit further over as things unfold over the next few weeks, and come back to this topic. I as we discussed in the preparation of this show today, I would have liked to unpack this a little bit more, but there's just not enough information around at the moment to where this is really going. So I'm curious to see what the developer community is doing, if they're catching on to it, if they're really biting the bait essentially, and see this as a true opportunity to have an open platform to connect, or is it just another attempt to do market capture? We've all seen in the mobile space as well as in the social media space where companies pretend to be open development platforms just to basically capture the market later themselves, and basically push everybody else out that was trying to benefit from the platform. So we'll see if this is another one of these, or if it's a true open attempt to have a fair playing field for everybody, Dave.
Time will tell.
Time will tell. Okay, on to our next news item. We've got the news that OpenAI's Sora video model appears to have leaked. Dave, what's that all about?
Yeah, so OpenAI a few months ago demonstrated Sora. So internally, they've produced some videos from it. It's an incredibly powerful video generation tool. And I guess what they're in the process of doing is ensuring that it's safe. And so, as part of that, they've released it to a bunch of beta testers. And they haven't put a lot, Sam Altman even spoke about this, saying they haven't put a lot of restrictions on their beta testing community. And so, what has happened here is the screenshot that's kind of in this X or Twitter post is talking about dear corporate AI overlords, is how, how they start their frame. Clearly, kind of a calm and rational statement to begin. But I
Mm-hmm.
think what they've done here is they've posted the turbo variant on Hugging Face, which is a common site to download some of these models. And what people were able to do is, for a period of time, for about 3 to 4 hours, generate 15 to 30-second clips of 1080p video from this new Sora interface. And so a lot of those videos that were created were leaked on social media. You can kind of track them down and see them. They're really impressive. It's great quality video. Really, it's coming together and doing great, impressive technical feats in producing this video. But it's more interesting just to think about kind of the controls and governance and how this has happened in the Apple world. Like when one of the first iPhones, the next version of the iPhones, was left in a bar sometime, people couldn't figure out if that was a mistake in security or whether it was a marketing tactic to try and build publicity around that. So there's the kind of both sides of the conversation around this. Is this a mistake and someone who's posted this, or is this a great marketing ploy for OpenAI and their releasing of this tool? It's a way for them to get some of this video out there without necessarily doing it themselves.
For sure. Do you do you think there's maybe a possibility that this is a hostile move?
I think, well, given the tone and the language in the post, it looks hostile, and the frustration is where the training data came from, some of the security measures. They're feeling like the people who've posted this message, the beta testers, this small group of them, feel like OpenAI is moving too fast. They're fast and loose. That's their kind of high level statement, which I think is they're trying to dominate market share, as we talked about, between Anthropic trying to eat their lunch with developers. That's a core challenge for them to figure out in their business. Do you think they're moving too fast, Peter?
Well, to me, it seems to be all a dichotomy that's a little bit like a charade, like uh, local theater play in a sense. Because to me, to be honest, this is maybe too, hopefully not to being too honest, but um, it's a little bit like, oh, move fast and break things, even with AI. And we're really concerned about the consequences. And now let's go to Congress and tell everybody that we have to regulate this stuff, right? Like all in one company and even more so in one person seems to be questionable motivations. I don't know. It's just, to me, it just has a bit of a smell.
Yeah, there's a lot of, with the high profile departures from OpenAI, with a lot of the complaints with reducing the budget around AI safety, with all these different factors, and this is just one more arrow or dart in that kind of common thread that OpenAI is moving too quickly, isn't being careful enough. This is just more evidence toward that. As you say, local pageantry theater around it. Is it true? Is it just some people's perspectives? I think there, no matter what the topic, there'll always be a diversity of opinion. It's hard to know where the truth lies in this one.
Very difficult. And that's, I agree with that. There's so much noise around in this space and in any tech space when it comes to social media and public sharing and podcasting and so on. Like, of course, they don't just have friends, especially amongst their competitors, which are not exactly small players. And in the same time, it seems like they have some people that are not friends even internally, right? Of what the company is doing and where it's going, and hence we've seen all the changes, but we're also seeing these small effects maybe as a result. It could be a clever move to get extra publicity, but is that something they would construe at this point? I mean, it's not that they're lacking public attention. I mean, any sentence that Sam Altman is tweeting right now becomes major news on every podcast around in the industry. So I'm not sure. It seemed to be To me, it seems to be like a hostile move, but it might have been another play. Anyhow, let's move on to our next news topic. So we got Zoom with news asking us to allow them to reintroduce themselves. So that's another, to me, a little bit controversial announcement, and that's because I think this could truly be for the motivation they're bringing forward here is to basically become a more effective tool for meetings and the preparation thereof, saving us work hours and bringing our work, sometimes overloaded work hours, back to something more palatable to most information and knowledge workers. But there could also be, of course, the idea that they're under hard attack from platforms and vendors like Microsoft having Zoom bundled into their Office packages. Not having Zoom, having Teams bundled into their Office packages, and therefore making it more and more difficult for an independent vendor of what I think is a great tool, Zoom. I use it every day at my work still, and for it to become more and more difficult to actually create to monetize the value they're bringing to the market. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, it's funny. Zoom is not unfamiliar to most of us, I would guess. Zoom exhaustion is probably familiar to most of us as well. I try and schedule 1 to 2 telephone calls in my week because I spend so much time on Zoom that just to have an audio conversation with someone is a nice, refreshing change.
Right.
Back in the day when we used to have way too many phone calls. Yeah, Zoom's dropping the word video from their legal name, adding in a lot more AI. I think I'm really curious to see, again, we're still figuring out what the right protocol and interaction is for AI, and is adding in AI tools for note-taking, meeting prep, all these different elements. How much of a difference is that actually going to make? I'm curious about.
Mm-hmm.
The CEO is taking a big swing with this announcement and this reintroduction, harkening back to Henry Ford. When Henry Ford first put the production line in place, the big dramatic change for workers was that it dropped your work week from 48 hours to 40 hours. You could do more and create more productivity with less effort on the individual worker. So that's the hallmark of the CEO is calling out to that moment in time, saying this is going to be the same level of impact, that your work week will change, that it'll make your life easier and be able to do more with less. That's a pretty big claim. I'll be curious to see if that does in fact come forward. Great. But is like an AI note taker, I think we've all used them, is that going to be the magical pixie dust that makes that happen?
Yeah, it's a little ambitious, I think, on the ambitious side. If they want to really save 8 hours out of my work week, seems to be an ambitious claim. But certainly, I mean, I think there's the other side of the coin is like trying to stay relevant in a highly competitive market and being under so much pressure from an industry giant. I cross my fingers for them, to be honest, and I hope that they can prevail independently and continue to be viable as a business. So that I think that would be great for all of us to have options, to be honest. And back to your comment there, saying you scheduling a couple of phone calls a week to have a bit of a change up in your communication with clients or collaborators or friends or people you work with. I actually find it funny. I still sometimes just call people out of the blue. And more in the last couple of years, this feels more like a prank to me than a phone call. So, it's sort of funny. I mean, it used to be completely normal that you call someone, you dial up the number and they would pick up the phone or they wouldn't. And then you had answering machines later and then you leave a message or you wouldn't. But it was a phone call. And now when you call someone out of the blue, they're so surprised because everything is pre-arranged and scheduled and you have to send 3 texts and confirm that you're going to make a phone call to somebody now. It's a different world. And I actually I always say, here's the old guy phoning you like we used to, remember? And it's sort of fun. I'm enjoying it. Dave, what do you think when I call you up out of the blue?
I love it because I know you well, but it's funny. I think there's a stat out there that it's changed. Our norms and social rules have changed. I think 80% of people, not just millennials or younger people, but 80% of people now feel that it's rude to just call out of the blue without
Exactly.
sending a text first, which is like it's a an inappropriate statement to just
Yeah.
call someone. And when someone typically calls me, I'm assuming there's something wrong.
Yeah.
A friend of mine called me the other day because they were stuck at the side of the road, and I was like, "Yeah, that's what I'd expect. You're
Right.
stranded at the side of the road. That's a reason to call someone."
Yeah.
Because you're wondering what's for dinner is not a good reason to call someone.
Yeah,
It's
so
just funny how it's changed.
yeah, it's changed, but I don't know why I enjoy it so much. I mean, I often, when I don't do this like daily, but once in a while when I call someone out of the blue, just because I feel like talking to that person
Mhm.
more socially than with work stuff, of course. But and they're like, "Oh, what's up?" And I'm like, "Nothing," and they're like, and they're like, "Oh, okay then." And it's like you have to then have a reason to start the conversation, and of course usually call and say, what's up, and here, this is what I'm doing, and how's the weather there, and how's the weather here, and somehow you get it
Mhm.
going, of course. But it's an interesting aspect, and I'm doing. I mean, maybe I'm stuck in the side of my head instead of the side of my road, or of the road. So I think it's great. I think it's fun, especially with younger people when they don't know what to do
Mhm.
with it. So it's good fun. Anyhow, let's move on to our next topic, and that's our deep dive. Dave, I'll let you introduce
Mhm.
it, and then we'll go from there, maybe.
For sure. Yeah. So I think one of the experiences that we had, Peter, was the other day you dug into trying to create a social media plan or marketing plan for one of the products you're looking at, and you used ChatGPT to do that. You were stuck somewhere where you didn't have access to a computer, so you just had your phone and you were going back and forth. And I found it really fascinating the quality and fidelity of the plan that you ended up getting back from ChatGPT. So we kind of
Okay.
replayed that with a whole script here. I'm really fascinated to kind of dig into the tactics you use to interact with ChatGPT, your prompt engineering, as they call it, or the questions you ask to the tool, and the quality of information you get back are really interesting. So I wanted to kind of talk through that and discuss that.
Let's have a look at that. Okay, that's great. Just to make sure that it's not misunderstood. So this script that we have here is, in terms of the prompting that I used, is something I used for an actual project. But the example that we're sharing here is strictly for the purpose of sharing the concept and the ideas. The product and the company we're talking about is strictly a figment of my imagination. It's nothing that we're working on at the moment. It's just basically to illustrate the point. So keep that in mind, please. Okay, so I'm gonna add the screen here and give it back to you, Dave.
Yeah, appreciate that. So the idea here is we want to share all this, so we'll send this across and make this available to our audience, so you can kind of see what the interaction was. But tell me about how you started, Peter, and what your intent was and how you started with this question.
Okay, of course. Meanwhile, maybe you can zoom in a little bit so it's better readable for a video, for people watching the video. We're sharing, for people listening on audio, we're sharing the screen of the actual script of the interaction between me and ChatGPT. So the idea here was I was this earlier this year, this late summer, I had pneumonia, actually, unfortunately, and had to go to the hospital. And hospitals here are such that you have to often wait many hours before you see a doctor, unless you're in really critical condition. And so I was waiting there with many other people, and I didn't know what to do, and I had only my phone with me to consume media, to entertain myself, to read something, and so on. And so eventually, I'm working on a project right now, where we're developing a new product in the space of AI, of course, that I think is going to be very interesting, and we'll share later in a few months from now, most likely. However, I was thinking about what would be a good marketing plan to launch that new product, and so I started this interaction with ChatGPT that we're sharing here, Dave, and that was the impetus, that was the motivation. So I basically just started talking to ChatGPT, and later on we'll see that I treated ChatGPT in this case as if it's one of my staff members from a viewpoint of let's say a seasoned marketing manager, and that was the motivation here, to essentially see as how far I could get with getting a good solid marketing plan out of this interaction. That was the
Mhm.
motivation.
Excellent. And so you kind of begun. I really find it interesting how you begin with a short question. It gives you some background on the alchemist. Then there's this really detailed prompt that you send back.
Right.
So you've essentially kind of thought this through, added a lot of detail. In your actual in that moment, I'm glad you're better now. In that moment when you're in the hospital bed, were you typing this out or were you talking it out to the
I was
interaction?
typing
Just
this
curious.
into the phone actually. Yeah.
Okay.
So I took
And so
some
you've got this.
time. Like the entire interaction probably took about an hour,
Mhm.
back and forwards, as you will see. And what I've learned in this and previous work with ChatGPT is that, of course, the more detailed and clear you are at the beginning of an interaction about, pursuing a certain goal or a task, the better it transpires down the road. So I knew I had to invest a little bit of work and thought into prompting, preparing, briefing ChatGPT here, what I want, what I'm looking for, but also what exact role I want ChatGPT to take. So
Mhm.
I basically wanted to base the theme of the company that we're talking about in this fantasy world here, to be based on the book of The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, one of the most popular books in the world, being translated in a lot of almost all languages in the world. And I think it's actually, I read somewhere, I'm not sure if it's true, it's the second most translated book after the Bible.
Mhm.
I wanted to base it on that, in this fantasy example, and called the company Alchemize Inc. And the first product we're about to publish here is called Alchemize App. And the idea around the app is essentially that it helps a user through the process of a really high workload work environment that might be stressful, that might be high demanding, but that's also occupied by someone that is committed to a high level of delivering a high level of performance, and then make the app in this idea to be at the intersection of productivity, but also mental and personal and physical health. And so
Mhm.
I explained that in this prompt to ChatGPT. And as you can see a little bit higher, I tell ChatGPT, your background is that you are a very experienced marketing expert like Seth Godin or Rory Sutherland. So I picked those two because they're extremely well published. So most likely ChatGPT knows a lot about their approach to marketing and positioning a company and a product. So I give it basically a role that is beyond just general marketing knowledge. I say, kind of work like these guys. And I find that I get better results. And I didn't do an empirical study on this. It's just by feel that I feel like if I put ChatGPT in a specific role that it understands based on, for instance, the publications of Seth Godin and Roy Sutherland, that it works a little bit harder and better for me. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I love the positioning. You're giving it a specific person, whether it's an artist, whether it's a marketer. You're giving it a person to kind of emulate. You're telling it that it's extremely smart. Like you're doing these interesting things that kind of position it very well, and then you're giving it all this background. And the other thing I love that you do is now before you begin, what are the 10 most important questions? You're giving it a foundation to work from that builds your thinking. So what it comes back with here is these 10 questions, primary audience, unique value proposition. The
Right.
things that it comes back with are jumping off points for your next conversation with it, which I think you did extraordinarily well here. So it
Okay.
came back with all of these questions it would need to know or want to know, and you're loading into its memory the elements that it will need to be successful in all of this, like budget, existing partnerships and collaborations, legal and ethical compliance considerations. And so I think then what you do is you step back in and start to answer some of those questions. So you take that grounding that it provided, you give it all these answers of saying who their initial target audience is, what is unique value proposition. There's a bunch of work that you're layering into this, but these are all very clear ideas from kind of the early idea that you've got, or as you're answering these questions, it's solidifying that knowledge in your brain. You're actually able to kind of think through this, and you're giving yourself a good bootstrap or jumping off point to answer these questions, codify your thinking. What are the 10 things I need to answer for you to be really successful at this? It asks you those questions, and then you jump back in and provide that context. So there's a lot of context you provide into this prompt. There's a ton in through here.
And if I may just interrupt there, Dave,
Please.
if you scroll up a little bit there was a question about here, number 3. How are the themes? This is what ChatGPT asked me as one of the 10 questions I asked it to give me, right? What I'm doing with this prompt of saying, before you begin working on the task that I've given you, create a marketing plan, essentially, is I want actually ChatGPT to think about what's necessary to do this job well. And that's what I force it to do, essentially, to say, okay, how do I structure this project, and what do I need answered in order for being able to ask to deliver what Peter's asking, which is a high quality, in-depth marketing plan for this project, right? If I don't do this at the beginning, then ChatGPT tends to go in a more iterative way over these items, and it becomes an endless conversation that tends to get lost in the weeds a little bit, right? So that's one motivation. And the other one here, as one of the questions it brought up, is how can the theme of the Alchemist book be brought into this? And basically what I did, instead of writing this all out, I used a little trick. I actually went into another ChatGPT window and asked ChatGPT to write a summary, in bullet points about the book. And I just basically copy and pasted that here. Now, to you, if you haven't done that, it might feel a little bit incestuous, right? Like you're asking ChatGPT about the concept of the book and paste it back in to answer its own question. But again, it just provides a richer context to ChatGPT of what I want from it and what I want to focus on. And of course, I edited it also somewhat to make sure it concentrates on the right items, Dave.
That's great. And I think it's this level of detail and context is clearly providing better answers in terms of what we get back. So you've answered all these questions.
Yep.
It says, thank you for the comprehensive answers. It acknowledges you've done a lot of work on that, which I love.
I get a pat on the shoulder as well. That's nice.
Good job, Peter. And I think in that then is a detailed proposal. And so what it's actually diving into is the actual task that you've asked of it. At this point, you're starting to build some strategy. And I think you and I, when we went through the original example and even through this example, what our impression of this is if there was someone who was a mid-level marketing person or organization, and we gave them a week to go away and do this same task, we're almost getting back that level of quality in terms of what ChatGPT is responding to with us. We can't just copy and paste and run with this. But for you to be able to take this and have actionable next steps out of it, there's a ton of material in this. And whatever the task, if you're willing to get to this level of interaction with it, spend an hour. You're saving yourself a week or X number of dollars from a consulting fee to get this done if you can use these tools right. Today, with the 4.0 version of ChatGPT, there's an amazing amount of detail you can get from these interactions, which is lovely.
Yeah, I mean, I approach this basically from the position of, let's say I'm the CMO in this company or in this startup, and I'm working with a high-level experienced marketing manager, and this is basically the type of interaction I have. Like, I get all these suggestions, all these concepts and ideas, and of course I have to curate and decide at the end, what do I want to implement of these things, or what do I want to maybe implement in a modified way. But the interesting part, the richness and the in-depth sort of the sheer volume of decent to sometimes high quality concepts, ideas, and content it can almost feel overwhelming. But as you can see, it's really easy then to go through and say, yeah, that makes sense, and this maybe doesn't.
Yeah, it resonates with you really quickly, or it doesn't, and you can double down on getting it to refine what doesn't resonate really well with you quite quickly, which is a lovely back and forth interaction.
Exactly.
So these core marketing strategies it develops, There's a ton of information in through here, how you can be successful, budget allocations, where you should spend if you have a $25,000 budget, where you should be breaking that down into and across all these different areas.
Yeah,
A
and that budget
timeline.
was part of the questions that ChatGPT gave me. Like, what's your budget to get this product launched, essentially, right?
Mhm. So
Okay,
as you fed that in, it's getting more detailed, and
right.
then the timeline and the activities, like a breakdown of almost an editorial calendar level detail here,
Yeah,
and then KPIs, which is interesting.
yeah.
Do these feel like they're accurate and are good from your perspective?
Yeah, I think there's on a high level there are good starting points. I mean, I gave it only a very brief description of what the company's goals are, right? I said, okay, we want this company with 5 to 7 employees to be financially viable and cash flow positive within a few months. And that's, of course, an ambitious goal for an entirely new company, new product. But based on that, it gave the right things to measure. I mean, how much progress are you making with essentially your marketing and sales funnel?
Hmm. And then in terms of the ethical and legal considerations from a non-human thinking about the human impacts, what was
Right.
your impact on these
It's
responses?
a little bit generic, to be
Mhm.
honest. I think you need to prod it to go deeper on those if you really want something useful out of it. I mean, GDPR and so on in Europe, CCPA, these regulations you have to follow and so on and so on. And I mean, it doesn't take a lot of research to find that. But I believe if you really want to dive into that as a key MVP, no, not an MVP, a key differentiator for your product. For instance, you could, and I didn't focus on that aspect here, but as you can see a little bit below here for the next prompt, I'm prodding it to basically go deeper on other aspects.
And why was that? Like, why did you want to dig into these 2 points?
I My mind always goes into, okay, I need a general plan to execute a project like this product launch. And then I also tend to feel like I need some meat to the bone in terms of how do we position the product, what's the communications around it, how does it feel when the words come across my lips, or they are in a presentation or in an elevator pitch. And so I asked it in that next prompt essentially to dive deeper into the messaging, the actual messaging, and that was so I can get a feel for, do we have something here that is actually going to be attractive to communicate.
Hmm. And in that, were you satisfied? How would you pick out of these different so these elevator pitches? Which of these would you choose, or how would you go about discerning which was the right one?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the first one here, elevator pitch one that it suggested as part of my request is, in today's fast-paced world, stress and overload are constant companions for students, creators, and professionals. So those are the 3 target audiences I gave it. So it got in the first sentence, I got to the problem and the audience, right? So am I part of this audience, and do I have this problem, right? Alchemy's app is your AI-powered personal assistant that not only boosts your productivity, but also safeguards your well-being. So this is the unique value proposition, right? It's not just a task manager that is better at analyzing what to prioritize and help you work with tasks. It's also looking at how well you're doing in doing more and more and more of those tasks with the help of the app and the system, right? It
Mhm.
seems from your daily routines helps it learns sorry I'm sorry it learns from your daily routines, helps you prioritize tasks, and gently guides you away from burnout. With Alchemize, you can pursue your ambitions and enjoy the journey along the way. That's an elevator pitch. Okay,
Mhm.
I would say I've heard worse.
I've heard a lot worse. It's first
And
draft. So, yeah, like this is a first draft. This is a pretty solid first draft.
right. And so it goes on here, and the other ones are not worse than that. And so I haven't deeply analyzed the specific answers individual, which one I would choose. But I would probably take those and keep churning them through my own thought process, through reflecting them, of course, with other humans, especially in the target audience, and feed it back and keep optimizing. And I'm pretty sure after 4 or 5 times turning it through, you're gonna get to something that's very high quality.
And I think like that mirrors or mimics the human process, where you'd start
Exactly.
with a couple of words, you'd jot out the notes, you draw bullet points, and then iterate from there.
Right.
This is just a power tool in that process. You're not doing a lot that's different. It's
Right.
just automating and speeding it up.
Yeah. And that's exactly my approach here, as I mentioned above, is I treat ChatGPT here like a colleague, right? Like a very
Hmm.
experienced and well educated in the topic, well versed colleague. And I asked questions in a similar way. I think a meeting, and you know me from many years of working together, I think in a meeting I would probably have the same type of conversation, to be honest, sitting
Hmm.
across the table from each other. So
Yeah,
that's
it
how
was
it
me
works.
doing this work. It feels very similar in terms of how you'd interact with it, which is
Right.
interesting. And I think that that expectation of what I see some Chat GPT users do that I'm trying to call out through this whole process is
Okay.
you ask one thing and the answer comes back and it's not satisfactory.
Right.
And I think the level of detail and follow up and positioning and prompting and revision that you'd work with, as you say, a colleague, is what you should interact with one of these tools with to get the right results out of it.
Absolutely. I think that's where most people make mistakes at the moment in working with these tools. And let me try to explain this. So basically, what happens is people expect way better results more efficiently and faster than they would normally get if they do things themselves, right? I think what they miss is that the efficiency and the speed up of the process does not come from the part that is your input into the process. Your input has to be as elaborate and as focused and as well thought through as it has been when you work by yourself going through the thought process, or as you work with a human colleague. So if you work with a human colleague and you call them in a meeting room and they have is the headline theme of the meeting, let's say, marketing plan for app launch. If you don't give them a detailed briefing of as a CEO or as a CMO of what you're looking for and why you're launching this thing and what its purpose is and who the audience will be and where we see opportunity and where we see threats and so on and so on, then you're not going to get much back. You're going to get very generic boilerplate stuff, right? That is probably a bunch of bullet points for ideas of how to go through a generic marketing plan.
Hmm.
If you go and you go in depth and you be focused with your inputs, then you inspire thought on the other side with a human colleague as well as with these models. And so I think that is where the efficiency comes from. I can tell you that, and that's what surprised me is even at the first run through, this plan came back to me after this initial work of putting 20 minutes into a prompt in 5 minutes max,
Hmm.
right? And that's where
Okay.
normally a team goes away and comes back 2 days later, right? So,
Hmm.
and then you go through another iteration and another, and a week goes by, and then you might end up with something similar than this. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, like getting to this stage this soon, it's interesting because just in basic human communication, I think there's this weird assumption people have around these LLMs that it's perfect. It's a computer. It's going to execute crisply and perfectly. It knows math and can do all that accurately.
And
And
it
the
can read my
reality is,
thoughts,
it can read my thoughts.
right?
I can ask a simple question and it will know everything in my brain.
Right.
And the reality is, all of these tools are trained on human communication, frail, faulty human communication. And so we need to use those tools effectively of human communication to get the right response out of these tools. And I think that's where treating it like a colleague, humanizing it in a way, not because I think it's an actual person in there, but because that's what it's trained on. And I have to talk to it like I would talk to the human beings that wrote all the content that it's trained on to get the right level. And I have to go back and forth with it and coach and tweak and refine my request and expose all my thinking so that ChatGPT can come back with something that's meaningful in that. I think that's the trick that you really figured out in this process. And then I love kind of walking through it because you're exposing that. The kind of content you're getting back is really a result of these kind of short and then long interactions that you're pushing back on this, where it gave you that whole kind of narrative and approach. And then what you're asking for here is, witty, concise, attention capturing, engaging style. You're giving it more coaching on what you expect to get out of it,
Exactly.
and throw 10 taglines out, see what it comes back with around that, and you're digging into more detail to try and get back a better response.
Yeah, I mean, with this prompt here that you just showed, I basically just said, essentially in simple terms, I said not good enough, right? For what I got above in terms of this first draft of messaging. But instead of saying not good enough, try harder, I gave it more input of what I'm looking for, and it did better. Right? I wanted something more punchy. I want something more on the edge. I want something that grabs attention, and I got it.
I also love that it gave a bonus. It's trying to work harder for you because of the interactions going back. You asked for 10, and it gave you 2 more elevator pitches, like 11 and 12, and 3 more taglines.
Yeah,
it's going above and beyond, which
it's a good salesperson. It's like, here's what you asked for, and I give you some extra, so you stop asking me.
Exactly, which is from a computer is a fascinating response.
Right. Okay.
And then diving into this more kind of details you go through, coming down toward the end, what you actually get out at the end of the day is a really useful and interesting marketing plan that I think, in terms of the original experiment that you ran, how much of what ChatGPT, so you asked for guerrilla marketing tactics here,
yeah,
which even though guerrilla is technically spelt wrong because you're talking about a different type of gorilla in this context,
guerrilla,
the response you want. I'm sure autocorrect jumped in there.
Yeah.
And this
on the phone. I mean,
correct spelling.
Keep in mind typing on the phone, right? Like
exactly. Yeah, I'm assuming you typed the correct one and it autocorrected for you in this, but it still understood what you meant by that, which is
right.
Again, most humans wouldn't get that. They'd be like, gorilla, like
bananas,
dress up in the which I loved.
Really funny.
So in terms of what you got out of this, how much of this did you actually use for the original product that you were targeting?
In terms of the volume of output, I would say maybe 30 to 40%. As you can see, this is an hour exercise on the phone. Of course, I skimmed a lot when I was actually doing this on the phone. Later on my computer, I analyzed it a bit deeper. When I was actually formulating a marketing plan and a launch plan for a product, I actually sat down and really distilled it down to what are the really like the killer ideas here, what's the good messaging, and frankly, if out of an hour of interaction you get one good tagline that really nails it, which I did in this case, you're a winner. Often it takes days to get down to something that really nails it, right? So maybe I would say 30 to 40%. In terms of the structure of the approach, and also in maybe 20 to 30% in terms of the actual messaging. And then you distill that down, and in the end, there is a few lines potentially, or maybe there is, in my specific example where I did it for the actual product, I actually in the end asked ChatGPT to write the website content for the homepage of the product, and it did a pretty good job after a little bit more prodding. I didn't add that to this document because it was just getting too long, but as you see at the very bottom, at the end, I asked a couple of questions that were different than what you would normally do. If you look at here, what do you think might be the most revolutionary truth about the Alchemize app that no one else currently agrees with? Think hard and do extra work on this one. Find answers based on first principles, please. So what I'm asking here is kind of to step a little bit out of the structured marketing plan and to say, think critically and in a contrarian way of how does this stick out? How does it make things what are we doing here that's different than what's out there in the market, essentially? What did you find here, Dave, for the answers? Do you think there's any value?
Yeah, I think if you think about the Mad Men, Don Draper, this would have taken 2 weeks and 3 bottles of scotch for him to come back with a really kind of punchy tagline and this level of insight.
Right.
This is the part of the conversation that you wouldn't get. You'd get the tagline,
right,
but you wouldn't get that inside thinking.
Right.
And so what I really liked about this is it actually gives you like some of these elements that you wouldn't writing is this great opportunity to explore someone's thinking. In conversation, it's always intermediated, but in writing, you get to hear someone's thinking about what's going on in their minds, and that's part of what you're getting at with these questions. So I think I love the think hard and do extra work and first principles that prompts you in your thinking and reading of this to found your kind of response to it in first principles. I thought it was a great prompt and a great idea, and comes back with, again, a number of different areas you can read through these, scan through them, lean in on the one that kind of resonates with you best, and double
Exactly.
down on that. It's a great tool.
Exactly. And it inspires new thinking for yourself as well. So,
Exactly.
and then finally, there is, I think, one more prompt that I found particularly interesting at the very bottom. That
That
was
one didn't come
already it.
through.
That was already it.
It's the
Yeah.
mystery one.
Yeah, it's a mystery. Yeah. Okay, so we'll share this document as a PDF on the show notes for download. So if you want to see the entire interaction, maybe use some of the prompts, modify to your own requirements and needs, feel free to go ahead. Leave some comments, please, how it's working for you. And of course, like and subscribe for this episode. So this is the end of episode 4 of AI Mavens. We're looking forward to more of these, and we are looking forward to having more like these hands-on showcases of what we are doing and what some of our clients are doing and people in the market are doing. Dave, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, we want to get practical with this, figure some out, do some homework, and share that with our audience, and figure out what people are interested in. So if people have ideas that want to explore stuff, if there's something we try that you like or want more of, we'd love to hear that feedback.
Please, yeah. So like and subscribe, and be back next week. See you then.